The 999 call? At 4 p.m. on February 20th, 2015, a worried father dialed 999. His 16-year-old daughter had vanished. Nobody had heard from her. Nobody knew where she was. For the Watts family in Bristol, the nightmare had begun. At first, it seemed like another missing teenager investigation. But within days, detectives would uncover a truth so shocking that it would horrify the entire United Kingdom. Because Becky Watts had not disappeared. She had been betrayed by someone she had known for most of her life. And the people standing beside her family during the search already knew exactly what had happened. Rebecca Watts, known to everyone as Becky, was 16 years old. Friends described her as kind, thoughtful, and caring. Teachers remembered her as quiet but intelligent. Her family called her a whirlwind of energy. She loved music, technology, and spending time with her close circle of friends. Nothing about her behavior suggested she was planning to run away. That is why her disappearance immediately alarmed everyone who knew her. The last confirmed sighting of Becky occurred on the morning of February 19th. She had returned home after staying with a friend. Her stepmother Angie was in hospital at the time. Becky was expected to spend part of the day alone in the family home. Shortly before 11 o'clock that morning, she sent a text message to her boyfriend. It would be the last message she ever sent. When her boyfriend later arrived at the house, nobody could find her. Her phone went unanswered. Hours passed. Then came the call to police. As officers launched a missing person investigation, the Watts family desperately appealed for help. Becky's father, Darren, posted emotional messages online asking his daughter to come home. Across Bristol, volunteers distributed posters. The hashtag Find Becky spread rapidly. Thousands of people shared her photograph. Search teams combed parks, woodland, and open land. The public believed they were looking for a missing teenager. But detectives were beginning to notice something strange. The last people who claimed to have seen Becky alive were her stepbrother Nathan Matthews and his girlfriend Shauna Hall. Both said they had heard Becky leave the house. Both described hearing the front door slam. Both told nearly identical stories. And that was exactly what troubled investigators. Experienced detectives know that genuine witnesses rarely remember events in exactly the same way. People forget details. They remember different sounds. They focus on different moments. Nathan and Shauna did not. Their accounts matched almost perfectly. To investigators, that suggested preparation rather than truth. Still, suspicion alone was not enough. Police needed evidence. Several days into the investigation, forensic officers returned to Becky's home. Inside her bedroom, they made a disturbing discovery. Faint traces of blood were found on the door frame. The amount was small, almost invisible. But laboratory testing would reveal something critical. The blood belonged to Becky. Further testing identified another DNA profile. It belonged to Nathan Matthews. The case changed instantly. Detectives were no longer searching for a missing teenager. They were investigating a suspected murder. Nathan Matthews was 28 years old. He was more than a decade older than Becky. Although they were members of the same extended family, their relationship had never been particularly close. Family members later described Nathan as distant and difficult. Over the years, there had been tension. Becky had struggled with personal issues as a teenager, including anxiety and an eating disorder. While her family worried about her well-being, Nathan reportedly dismissed her struggles as attention-seeking behavior. Investigators began looking deeper into his background. What they found painted an increasingly troubling picture. Nathan and his girlfriend, Shauna Hall, lived together in a cluttered house not far from the family home. When forensic officers searched the property, one detail immediately stood out. The house was messy. Rooms were crowded with belongings. Yet the bathtub looked spotless. It was unusually clean, far cleaner than anything around it. For investigators, it was impossible to ignore. The search continued. Then officers discovered receipts. The purchases had been made shortly after Becky disappeared. Protective equipment, cleaning supplies, tools. Security cameras confirmed Nathan had bought the items himself. The evidence was beginning to form a clear pattern, but detectives still needed answers. During questioning, Nathan initially denied involvement. Yet as the evidence mounted, pressure increased. Then came the breakthrough. Nathan eventually admitted responsibility for Becky's death. His explanation shocked everyone. He claimed he had planned to frighten Becky. According to his account, he intended to stage a kidnapping and teach her a lesson. He described bringing equipment to the house. He described confronting Becky. He claimed events spiraled out of control. Investigators were unconvinced. The explanation did not fit the evidence. As forensic teams examined phones, computers, and digital records, a far darker picture emerged. Deleted messages were recovered. Conversations between Nathan and Shauna revealed discussions about abducting young women. Messages suggested planning. Messages suggested fantasy. Messages suggested Becky had not been randomly targeted. Prosecutors would later argue that the kidnapping plan had a sexual motive. Evidence presented in court revealed an unhealthy fixation on teenage girls. The image of an impulsive mistake began to collapse. Instead, investigators saw signs of preparation, planning, intent. The search for Becky continued even after Nathan's admission. Eventually, officers were led to a property in Bristol. There they made a devastating discovery. Human remains were recovered. DNA testing confirmed what the family had feared. Becky Watts had been found. The news shattered Bristol. For nearly 2 weeks, thousands of people had hoped she would return home safely. Now the city was mourning. Flowers appeared outside the family home. Memorial books were opened. Churches held services. People who had never met Becky felt connected to her story. Many could not understand how such a tragedy could happen within a family. The criminal investigation continued for months. Detectives analyzed every message, every purchase, and every movement connected to Nathan and Shauna. What emerged was one of the most disturbing family betrayal cases Britain had seen in years. The trial began at Bristol Crown Court in October 2015. For weeks, jurors listened to evidence. They heard about the planning. They heard about the forensic discoveries. They heard about the digital messages. And they heard about Becky's final hours. The courtroom often sat in silence as details were presented. Members of Becky's family listened through unimaginable pain. The prosecution argued that Nathan and Shauna had worked together. The defense attempted to reduce Shauna's role, but prosecutors maintained that both had participated in the events that led to Becky's death. After hearing all the evidence, the jury reached its verdict. Nathan Matthews was convicted of murder, kidnapping, and related offences. Shauna Hall was convicted for her involvement in the crime. When sentencing took place, the emotional impact was impossible to hide. The judge spoke about the suffering inflicted upon Becky and her family. Observers later recalled the visible emotion in the courtroom. The tragedy had affected everyone involved. Nathan Matthews received a life sentence with a minimum term of 33 years. Shauna Hall was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment. For the Watts family, the verdict brought justice. But it could never bring Becky back. Years later, the case remains one of Britain's most heartbreaking criminal investigations, not simply because of what happened, but because of who was responsible. The danger had not come from a stranger. It had come from inside the family circle, from someone Becky had known for years, someone her family trusted. Today, Becky Watts is remembered not for the crime that ended her life. She is remembered as a daughter, a sister, a friend, a bright young girl with her entire future ahead of her, and as the symbol of a community that refused to stop searching, refused to stop hoping, and refused to forget. Even now, more than a decade later, the name Becky Watts still carries a simple but powerful reminder. Sometimes the darkest betrayals come from the people closest to us.